Hi, friends. Welcome to the Mobile Bev Pros podcast, a podcast dedicated to providing mobile bar and event professionals with the information they need to succeed. I'm your host, business coach, and founder of the Mobile Bar Academy, Sarah Murphy. In each episode, the Mobile Bev Pros team will bring you industry experts, information, anecdotes, and opinions with the goal of assisting you in building a profitable, sustainable, and successful business that supports you in creating wealth. I'm excited to share with you today's episode, so let's get started.
Welcome back to the MVP / Crowns and Chaos podcast. We are interrupting the Crowns and Chaos podcast for this particular episode and for the MVPers. This is just going to be like normal for you guys, but we wanted to bring this to both audiences because it is so relevant in both spheres for entrepreneurs in general. And so this is going to be a huge topic. We're talking about time, specifically how to bend time so that you have more of it and the time that you spend working is more productive with less of that noise, that BS in the background. And we've got some myths to bust. This is probably my favorite podcast ever. Have I said that before? That this is my
Every time.
We talk about a lot of groovy stuff. So we are talking to both audiences today about time bending. And Sarah, I'm so excited for this topic. You want to lead us into why this even came about for us?
Yes, I absolutely do. Not least of which is that we see it reflected back to us all the time in our more intimate containers. Every check-in, every check-out, people are reflecting back to us that they ran out of time, that time was their biggest constraint, that they feel like time got away from them, that they didn't have enough time, that this task was time consuming, which I shared with you yesterday. Every time I hear the term time consuming, I literally see Cookie Monster just like eating chunks of time, like nom, 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 nom. And we just have a very adversarial relationship with time, I think, in general, as members of the modern society, as entrepreneurs, potentially juggling lots of things. Maybe you have a day job, maybe you have kids, maybe you have all of the above, as well as a business. And we love to kick time. We love to make it the whipping boy of our existence. Because if only we had enough time, we would be more successful. We'd get more done. We'd be happier. We'd have all the things we wanted if only we could expand the amount of time that we have. And so it's very forefront of our mind and forefront of kind of what we do and what we help work people through. But then this past week, I was leading a pod meeting for the Cayuga Forum, which is an entrepreneurial organization specifically for Cornellians that my particular pod are entrepreneurs. There's one or two other people in there who are not entrepreneurs, but the vast majority of them are. And one of the engineers, who's not an entrepreneur, asked a question. She said, I have 3 competing priorities now, and I don't know how to navigate these competing priorities. I just started figuring out what she had already tried, what was working, and mentioned something. And I was like, but that's more about time bending, and we're not getting into that at the moment. And like the entire Zoom room leaned forward and was like, I'm sorry, what did you just say? Time bending? Like, we need more of that, whatever that is. And I was shocked because I was like, most people don't want to hear about things like time bending. They want to hear things like time management. And time management, it feels a little bit like an oxymoron, first of all, because like you can't manage time, really. Like time is just happening. You can manage yourself within time, but I see time management as a tool, as though it's a hammer. It's exactly one tool. Time management can help in certain circumstances really well. The concept of time bending, as we're going to discuss today, is a toolbox. There are a variety of different tools that can be pulled out and utilized for different scenarios. Ideally, they all work together. Like you don't walk into a job without a toolbox. You don't just walk in with one hammer and say, all right, let's build this house, right? You're going to walk in with a variety of different tools, and you're going to use different tools for the different projects that are ultimately going to build the house. And so I thought today would be a really helpful opportunity for us to just introduce the tools and kind of start there.
Yes. And I learned a new word just now about this because I wanted to say that time is a palindrome, and it's not. A palindrome is a word that is the same forward and backwards. This is called a simordinalap. A simordinalap, which I've never heard of. But the word time mirrored backwards is the word emit. From a language perspective, from a metaphysical perspective, we emit time. Okay. And if you're like, no, we don't, Dawn, we have 24 hours in a day. You actually have 23 hours and 56 minutes. Hello, leap year. But if you're like, we have 24 hours in a day and a minute, 60 seconds, I would like you to just think for a second on the last time you spent a minute having a blast and the last time you spent a minute doing something you hated.
Planks. The longest minute of my life is when I'm doing planks. I don't know what everybody else's longest minute is, but a minute doing planks is the longest minute of existence.
Right. You see. And so you can see that time is malleable and it's based in perspective. There's actually a ton of ways that we can expand time, collapse time, and it all has to do with our relationship to time. So I have some bullet points here, Sarah. I'm sure you have some bullet points, and we'll just see how they mix and mingle. I think the first thing that I would like to touch on is our relationship to time. Most people in the Western world, I won't speak for other civilizations because I live here, see time as a prison. They're always trying to control time, but simultaneously they feel controlled by time. It's like a little prison that they're in. I don't have enough time. I ran out of time. I need more time. There's tons of like insert phrase here that entrepreneurs use to emphasize this negative relationship that they have with time. When we see time as coming from within, now we're going somewhere deep. We won't go there on the podcast today, but we're actually looking at how we relate to time is how we relate to ourselves. And so if we feel like we live in a prison, reality could be included in this. Like reality is pretty malleable in the same way that time is pretty malleable. But a lot of people, they see them as very structured, very rigid, and prison-like. And so then we relate to time as a prison warden. It's this negative all father that just dictates our every move. And there is a much better way.
There's a book written by the author Carlos Rovelli. He is an Italian physicist, and it's called The Order of Time. And it's a pretty science-heavy based book. I found it lovely to listen to. I did it like while I was walking. And the conclusion of this book is essentially that time is merely one's perception of change. That is time. You'll read the book, he will conclude time doesn't exist in any real form. Time passes at different rates based on how hard or how strong the gravitational pull is. And so if you're at the top of a mountain, time is passing differently than if you are at sea level. And you will actually age differently, not very noticeably, but you would age differently based on the fact that our bodies are reacting to gravity in our aging process. And that if we were out in space, like no time would go by whatsoever, and like lots of time would go by here on Earth. And so when you're looking at the concept of time and you get to the end of all the science that we have about it, we can conclude time doesn't exist in any real form, except through our perception of change. And that is how we got time as in seconds, minutes, hours, days, years, because we have a very in your face example of day, night, day, night, day, night, and then 4 seasons in many places throughout the world. The sun's usually over here, and sometimes it's over here, but it's predictable, right? So that we can see the changes in the world around us, and we're like, time. We haven't always moved through time the same way that we do now. If you've ever heard of the term like fortnight, or they used to use the moon, like the next full moon we'll meet and we'll do this thing. And that's because it was how other people could tell time. And days were shorter in the winter and longer in the summer, but it was still time, right? Now we have electricity, and we have a more kind of standardized version of what time feels like. But if we're really going to dig to the concept of time bending, we really want to stop looking at time as 60 seconds or an hour or a week. And we want to start looking at it from the perspective of how long is it taking me to accomplish this change? Whether that's how long does it take me to make a bed? How long does it take me to build a website? And this is where we get to start to play with a variety of different tools in this toolbox, because it will take me less time to build an awesome website than it would take someone else who has not built mastery in that thing. And so one of the tools in this tool belt, and I don't want to jump right in, but the tool that we'd be using in that example is synergy. And we can talk more about that in a minute. But before we do that, I wanted to talk about this concept that you and I like to use, and you introduced me to it, of gentle alchemy versus violent alchemy. And so if we're going to consider time being how long it takes us to affect change, there are essentially two ways that we can look at this: gentle alchemy and violent alchemy. And I'm going to let you take the reins from there.
When you're looking at expanding or collapsing time, you have two options. With gentle alchemy, we are going to take a slow progressional approach to anything. And sometimes this is absolutely necessary. You cannot violent alchemy your way through life. In fact, I've known people who have gone this route, the red magic route, like just violent alchemy everything. And that's creating rapid changes in your life, massive changes, just blowing it up essentially. Like you're just Elon Musk is a great example of what it looks like to just live in violent alchemy all the time. And potentially that works really well for him. And so violent alchemy looks like total disruption. And so potentially you want to start a business. The gentle alchemy route looks like you form your LLC, you create a website, you create a landing page, you create all the email series, you SOP all your things, you make sure you have the proper equipment, the proper tools. And when your prism is perfectly polished, you present it to the world. That's gentle alchemy, and it takes a really long time. Your business formation potentially is going to take 3, 6, 9 months. Okay. Then there are violent alchemists who are just going to, before they have any of the systems in place, this is actually really beautiful for those of you who are like, it all has to be perfect. Violent alchemy is your medicine, because they'll just put a product into the world. Not even a product, they'll put a concept into the world and they'll start marketing it as loud as they possibly can. No LLC, no back-end softwares, no fancy schmancy sales funnel, no follow-up game. They just put it out there. And then when people are like, I want to buy it, then they build the plane, right? Once they have proof of the concept, now they're like, oh, well, shit, we need a fancy follow-up. Like hundreds of people wanted this. We have to find a way to get back to them. We need to be capturing their emails. So essentially they take action first and do all the thinking and all the processing later. Because of that, they experience rapid growth in a very short amount of time, meaning that they can collapse time. So they can create results now instead of later. And so gentle alchemy, violent alchemy, it's totally up to you. I would recommend finding the right balance in your life, okay? Because violent alchemy is very disruptive. Let's say I have a client that comes to me and she's really unhappy in her marriage. Violent alchemy, if she's ready, says, well, you're never ready for violent alchemy. Violent alchemy says, end it. Divorce your husband, deal with the fallout later. Gentle alchemy says, what steps do you need to take? Have you guys tried couples therapy? Who's going to be involved? Let's ponder on this for the next 6 months. But you can see how like no real change is occurring there, right? Whereas when she just leaves her husband and moves across the city, massive change is going to take place in a very short amount of time. She's going to have to deal with the fallout though. Violent alchemy always requires you to deal with the fallout on the back end. So you get reward on the front end, you get change immediately, and you just deal with whatever comes next. Gentle alchemy, you're anticipating what problems you'll have to meet and you're meeting them before they ever occur.
And it's situational. That's the thing. There's no right or wrong. There's no one that's better than others. I will say that oftentimes what we see and why this can be medicine is we see someone gravitate very specifically towards a specific type of alchemy all the time without discerning when one might be better than the other. So if you ever see anybody who makes giant strides all the time, they're just constantly like accomplishing big things, they're probably using a lot of violent alchemy. And what you're not seeing is all the cleanup on aisle 6 that needs to happen. And they are not attached to that cleanup on aisle 6. It means nothing about them. I was recounting the story that I saw the other day to you, and it was regarding Elon Musk. And it was about how he wanted a whole server farm decommissioned. And the engineers were like, it'll take us 6 months. And he's like, you got 6 weeks. And they're like, 6 weeks can't be done. He's like, great, because you only actually have 6 days. And they're like, oh my God, right? So Elon leaves the meeting. He gets on his plane with his 2 like nephews or something. The nephews are probably equally as unhinged as Elon is. And they say, well, why don't we just take out the server farm? And he's like, turn around the plane, we're taking out the server farm. Somehow manages to get into the server farm and like literally uses like a knife and a jackhammer or something to like get these servers out of there. Literally cuts all the wires, removes them from the server farm. And he's like, all right, that took 6 hours. You know what I mean? The person recounting the story was basically saying like, inevitably there was fallout. It was a little bit chaotic, and Twitter, now known as X, experienced issues because they had multiple server farms. Now they were down one server farm. And so the engineers had to basically figure out how they were going to navigate this change in traffic and this change in all of the stuff that they had. But you know what? Didn't take them 6 weeks to fix that. That form of violent alchemy brought forth the change that Elon wanted, and the chaos he could give a shit about. Like, yeah, that's going to happen. I recognize that there was going to be fallout from that. And like, I don't care. It doesn't mean anything about me. And if there's anything Elon is consistent in, is he don't give a fuck. He don't give a fuck about what anybody says, what repercussions there might be. Now, on the flip side of that, these engineers, they have families, they have work, they also have a life. And so what was maybe a scheduled vacation got blown up because Elon decided that he wanted these server farms gone. And so his I don't give a fuck mentality potentially negatively impacted a lot of people. A rational person might look at that same scenario and be like, what a dick. And like, yeah, but also he implemented massive amounts of change in 6 hours, which is what his goal was. And so when you utilize violent alchemy, you have to kind of recognize that the reason it's violent is because the repercussions are not always pleasant. And you have to be willing to accept whatever those repercussions are, even if someone gets hurt. And obviously in this case, no one physically got hurt, but like there might have been some pain induced. On the flip side, to your point, with gentle alchemy, we're trying to mitigate all of those potentialities on the front end. And so it takes a lot of time, and yet still you may not get them all. Your divorce situation, you could go through the couples counseling. Maybe you've got kids and you're talking to your kids about it, and you're like trying to do the best that you can to mitigate all of these negative circumstances and consequences. And a year later, it finally does end up in divorce. People are still going to hurt. It's still going to suck. It's still not going to feel very good. Right. And so just because you choose the gentle alchemy route doesn't mean you're going to get it perfect, but you'll have implemented change. And that was the goal. Right. And so like both of these things can accomplish that, but it just depends on like, are you going to choose violence today? You know, when you wake up, you can make that decision.
Yeah, it's definitely volatile. The thing that came up for me as you were talking about Elon was procrastinators. And if you, again, your words create your prism or your prison. You are either slave to time or a master of time. In Muneki shamanism, we call these people timekeepers. Procrastinators recognize that they are more motivated, that they have clearer access to the muse when they wait until the last minute. And so you could say, I'm a procrastinator, and that's a prison. You could say, I'm a violent alchemist, and that's a prism. You see, we're using the same thing. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm going to wait until the very last minute. And guess what? My work is going to be superior. All right. It's going to be fantastic. And that's because I waited until I had inspiration. to accomplish the task. And in all that time that I'm waiting, had I been negative, oh, I'm such a procrastinator. Oh gosh, woe was me. I hate doing tasks until the last minute. Why am I like this? Then I'm not embracing my relationship to time. I'm making it negative. And there are probably a lot of people who are listening to this who have an intuitive relationship to time. I don't want to negate the people who have a logical relationship to time. You are also seen and also validated. I myself have an intuitive relationship to time. My husband's always like, what time do we need to leave to be there? I'm like, when I fucking step out the door. And when I step, I'm always on time. Like I'm always there with a single minute to spare. And I've always been that way. I just have this intuitive relationship to time. And so I don't run my business. I don't work for MVP in any different manner. I embrace the fact that I'm going to be inspired at the exact moment I need to be. And I call this divine time. It's not even my time. It is the divine's time.
The song Always on Time by Ja Rule went through my head.
Long time. Yes. I love it. I love it.
So you specifically brought up the concept of procrastination. And for me, that leads into this very necessary piece of time bending, that divine time and like the creation or the acceptance of space, I feel like very much hold hands here. There's an adage, and I don't know if it's accurate, and I've recounted it to you like 2 times this week, but it is attributed to Einstein. And he was asked, if you had an hour to save the world, what would you do? And he said, I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and 5 minutes acting upon it. And a lot of times, what people call procrastination, which is like, I'm just anxious about the fact that I haven't done a damn thing, right, is actually space that you're allowing your subconscious to noodle on that problem. And the reason that's so important is that the subconscious is way smarter than you. It's a part of you, but you can't really access it, right? So your subconscious brain has access to a vast supercomputer that your conscious brain can only pull like little bits and pieces. It doesn't have very much RAM. Basically, your subconscious has to scream at you, which is why when you're trying to figure out a thing and then you go take a shower and then you go like, oh my God, I got it, right? Like it's an aha moment. It's because your subconscious brain this whole time has been drawing correlations and like pulling from things that you totally thought you had forgotten. And it's drawing all of this massive amounts of information that maybe aren't even related, that you heard once when you were 12, and it's pulling it back out and it's saying like, oh, here you go. It's like screaming at you the answer, and you take all the credit. Your conscious brain is like, I thought of it. Now, you may never have come up with that answer if you just sat in front of your computer screen, journaled it based on the notes that you have. You may never have come up with that answer. Space and this belief or this understanding that we can utilize divine time. There's a couple of aspects here that I think are really important. One, space is what the creative aspects of your problem-solving abilities require. You cannot be creative under pressure. You just can't. You need space for that. The second thing here is we have to release with divine time or the utilization of this particular tool. You have to release all fucks. So with divine time, to your point, you're like, you're never late. Even if you were late, too bad, right? You have to release all expectations, people-pleasing tendencies, all this person will be mad, this person will say this thing, this person will be passive-aggressive about the time I was late or the fact that I was late, right? You got to release all of that and just recognize that like, when God intends, you will show up, right? That's another big piece here, is that if you have an anvil hanging over your head, you're not really releasing or relaxing into divine time.
Yeah, there's 2 things that I want to talk about on that. The first one is reality bending, and the second one is slowing down to speed up. I'll do the second one first. Slowing down to speed up. When you feel rushed about a thing, you are collapsing time in a destructive manner. And so if you've ever been late to a meeting, isn't it that you hit every red light? Isn't it that you spill your coffee? Isn't it that there's a traffic jam right outside the building? Do you see what I'm saying? when you are in a space of surrender, when you look at the clock and you say, oh, I have but 5 minutes left. Oh, well, like, what can I possibly do about that? I want to be clear here that I'm not saying be an irresponsible human. Part of holding integrity in any structure is taking radical ownership. So when you're late, you don't want to be like, God did it. You know what I mean? Like, that's not what we're telling you to do. And surrender is recognizing that if forces are, and they always are happening outside of your control, you being stressed the fuck out about it is not going to help you move any faster. And in fact, and this goes into attachment and resistance magic, but I won't get into that on this episode. You're creating obstacles just by being stressed out. Okay. And so when you look into your world, we're going to take radical ownership. If I'm creating or co-creating all of this and I'm stressed out, I'm going to be creating more obstacles than necessary. The other piece of this is reality bending, and it is everything to do with how you're relating to the subconscious. And so when I say reality, I'm specifically talking about the space-time or time-space matrix. How you're relating to the subconscious, to your point, requires space. So I have another superpower where I have an internal GPS that allows me to find anything at all ever. I never lose. People are like, I lost the thing. I never lose the things. They're never lost to me. It happened to Harley and he lost something. And I was like, it's in the car. And he's like, I didn't take it with me. I'm like, no, it's in the car. He's like, no, babe, I didn't take it with me. I'm like, that's fine. I'm just telling you, I didn't know. And the thing that came to me was in the car. That's reality bending, saying, I don't know. Surrender is going, I have no idea. And so for Harley, he was very much in his logical mind saying, these events took place in a very specific order, so it cannot be in the car. So he looked for about 10 minutes before he remembered that, I'm really good at this. And he walked out to the car begrudgingly to find the thing that he had lost. It was exactly where I said it would be, against all his logic. And a lot of times that's what happens to us, is that we get stuck in the conscious mind and we're like, retrace your steps, right? That's what you always hear. You lose something, people say, retrace your steps. When you go, I have no idea for anything, whether it's time, whether it's finding a solution to a problem, whether it's in meditation or around whatever step you need to take in your relationship, whatever it is, when you move into I don't know and you create space there, the answer will bubble up, but the subconscious only speaks in feelings and symbols. And so that's why you have to be silent and spacious in order to receive those images from the subconscious, because it doesn't have words.
This is a beautiful segue into this next thing. And you and I were talking about this yesterday, how it's like such a critical point, but we know that some of the listeners, if not all of them, are going to have a little bit of resistance here, because we tend to attract high achieving, very intellectual, very logical individuals. And so on the same note, I recognize that you're potentially going to feel a little triggered here as a listener. When it comes to the subconscious and the fact that it only speaks in emotions and symbols, if you are coming at it from a place of restriction and constriction, you're going to not only not be looking for opportunities. So like, you're like, you hit every red light and like someone's in front of the door. If you were not in a place of constriction and you're like, I'll get there when I'll get there, you might be looking for opportunities. Oh, that road's blocked. That one's not. And I can actually just go down this road and take a right here. You're not looking for opportunities. You're not looking or even open to possibilities that were outside of what you already had in your mind as like, I am late, right? So there's two states, and most people walk through their entire world in a very constricted or restrictive state, wherein you and I talk about like confining and defining. If you know what this is supposed to look like, and you know what you want this to feel like, and you have an understanding already of what this looks like if it goes well, and what this looks like if it goes wrong, you're in a constrictive state. You're not open to other possibilities. You're not allowing things to flow through you. And you're also not picking up on what your subconscious is telling you, or even inviting you to know a thing, if you're in that constricted state, because you're actually closing yourself off from your body. And this actually will trickle into, and I'm raising my hand here, but if you've ever said like, I have a really high pain tolerance, you probably are not connected with your body, because it means your body has to scream really loudly for you to notice that it's in pain. right? And that's because you've closed it off for a number of different reasons. Maybe you don't like feeling sad or angry or anxious. And so you just decide not to feel that way. And your body will happily do that. If your body doesn't feel like it's safe to have those feelings, your body's really smart and it'll just like, okay, we don't have those feelings. Again, raising my hand. Someone asked until relatively recently, like, when's the last time you were angry? I'd be like, I don't get angry. Okay, that's a problem because that is a very real emotion that like you should have. People have reasons to be angry. Now, should you always be angry? No. Anger is a thing that comes up and you process. Every emotion needs to be processed, right? But if you don't process your emotions, then you're not going to notice when your subconscious is talking to you. You're not going to hear the call. And like to your point, when you have the ability to like listen to your subconscious, it's possible in the millions of bits of information, some part of your brain saw Harley carry that out to the car at some point. Does your conscious brain remember that? No. Maybe there was no way for you to gain that access to the information. I was telling this story this morning that in the midst of absolute fucking chaos in my house, my subconscious brain was like, check your daughter's passport. And I'm like, no, my daughter's passport doesn't expire until 2025. And I was like, but my intuition, it's worth listening to. I went upstairs, I checked it. It expired last week and we have an international trip in 6 weeks, And so like, thank God I have enough time to actually go and expedite this process. But had I ignored it and not looked at it, like we'd be in a tough place right now. And so as part of this tool belt, this toolkit of time bending, a very real and very important part is to get back in touch with your body, especially if you're uber logical and you're like, I'm not going to check the passport. I know it doesn't expire until 2025. That's going to hinder your ability to bend time.
Yes, because you absolutely feel anger. You've just numbed yourself to it. And this is the process of suppression. And you and I have been, I wish this podcast could be 6.5 hours long and we could talk about all the things. But the conscious mind has been raised up as superior in our day and time. We see this with the rise of the masculine time system. Time used to be a very intuitive thing, and now it's more of a masculine logical thing. And that process of raising the logic brain in a hierarchy to the subconscious has caused a lot of damage, both psychologically and emotionally, to us as a society, potentially us as an entire planet. Suppression is part of that process where the conscious mind will say anger is an inferior emotion. Or when you were little and it wasn't safe for you to be angry, you were sent to your room, you had to process your emotions alone. Now you don't feel safe to feel that feeling. And so the conscious mind does what it does best. And even if the subconscious is attempting to send that signal, the conscious mind is just going to ignore it. So your subconscious mind is a powerhouse, and it's being influenced by the conscious mind via language, but it's influencing the conscious mind via symbol, emotion, and I would even say feeling. I want to separate feelings and emotions there, because emotions are like angry, sad, grief. Feelings are like stomach ache, headache, foot ache, back ache. And the more we ignore the physical body's cues, the less we can hear it when something's really wrong. Back to your point, if you have a high pain tolerance, it just means that you are highly skilled at turning off your supercomputer, essentially. Like, you have access to the world's most advanced technology. Like, we're all out here like, oh, AI is amazing. We have no computers that can even come close to that of the human system. And you're just shutting yourself off from it. There's a dynamic intelligence within you that will instruct you in any way. And I don't want to get off subject because we're talking about time here, but relating to the subconscious, relating to yourself on a deeper level, will enable you to become a timekeeper, to become a master of time rather than being mastered by time.
So to sum up, intuition and instinct is another tool in the time bending tool belt. My intuition said I needed to check that passport. And that's because my subconscious looked at that passport at one moment in time and realized and remembered it was August 2024. My conscious brain was like 2025. But my intuition, which is being fed by my subconscious that has absorbed way more information, was smarter in this instinct. So we want, when it comes to the time bending tool belt, to help people tap back into their intuition and their instincts as another tool in utilizing time bending.
And potentially the subconscious, this is Jung's work, is connected on a greater scale to what he called the collective unconscious. Now, there are symbols and themes that appear in the collective unconscious that each of us are tapping into. So, my example with Harley, maybe I never saw him take it downstairs. How did my unconscious know? Well, he knew. He saw himself pick it up and put it in his pocket and walk downstairs, right? And so even though when he went down and he found it, it was like in between the seat, it was invisible to us. It was completely invisible to me the entire time. Our subconscious is not separate from everyone else's subconscious. And so my subconscious was tapping into the collective for that information. That's what I mean by quantum computing, that you have the most advanced technology on the planet. Now, Sarah, this podcast is not for naught because we are actually launching a beta program on time bending. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that might look like?
Yes, absolutely. If there's one thing that has become evident while we've been playing with these concepts around time bending with our more intimate containers, it's that there is a great desire out there for people to have more fulfillment, more freedom that doesn't come with the standard productivity tools of get more done in less time, time management 101, et cetera, et cetera. And like that's available through the process of time bending. And there's two types of time, right? There's chronos and there's kairos. And chronos is that like quantitative time. And that's what every other time management tool really tries to manage is this quantitative time, get more done in less time so that you can eventually become more free, right? You have more free time and all that good stuff, which is everybody wants more free time to do what they love. But the other type of time is kairos, and that is qualitative time. And that is getting the most from the amount of time that we have here. And like bend time or don't bend time, we all have anywhere from 70 to 120 years on this earth. They say now that like people will start living to be 120 because we've got great technology. Great. Okay. So about 80 to 120 years here on earth. Those 80 to 120 years could feel like 1,000 years because you're unhealthy, because you are always stressed and anxious, because you have a to-do list that will never fucking end no matter what. And so you always feel like you're behind. And so life drags on because you're never free. You've never achieved what it is that you want to achieve, right? And so it feels like no matter how much time you have, there's never going to be enough. Or you can have just the absolute most fulfilling life known to man for those 80 to 120 years, where you live lifetimes because every moment is both vast and precious. And we are hoping to help people, especially those on the entrepreneurial journey, become fulfilled in the time that they're here through the process of time bending. And so we are creating a program. We don't have details around it just yet. We're still building it out, but like this is going to be intimate, like maybe 5 people total as a part of this program. Whoever joins this is going to really just get it all. And then based on like what we see works and what we see doesn't, we'll hone it from there. And so if you're interested in learning not only more about time bending, but like actually getting support and implementing it in your life, then do the things. Click the links, let us know, send us the emails so that we can get you on that wait list.
And this is ideal for people who feel bound to a 40-hour work week, for people who, make no mistake, fill any space they have. And so if you're someone who puts down one project to immediately pick up another, if you're a serial entrepreneur and you can't sit still because you're constantly creating new businesses or iterating new ideas, this is for you. And so whether you feel imprisoned by time or you just feel like you're constantly going and you're never fulfilled, this is for you.
Yeah, if you're one of those people that's like, I can't sleep because my brain doesn't shut up. Okay, that's part of this too. And I don't care if you are ADHD, ADD, whatever it is that you've self-identified with yourself as being why you can't seem to hold yourself accountable to things, get things done, whatever it is, there's medicine in time bending for you. And so, having said that, we would love to hear more from those that would like to hear more. But we're not done. We have more time bending tools. And the next one that I wanted to talk about is energy management. And a while back, I created a tool. It's actually in the academy still, where I think if there's like a weekly and a daily energy tracking system. And this blew my mind because this is a bit like Russian dolls, if you see that in your head. Men have a solar cycle because they don't have the crazy estrogen, progesterone menstrual cycles that we have. And actually, women who are post menstruation, so they've already kind of gone through menopause, they're closer to the solar cycle as well. But that doesn't mean that you don't have times within the specific day where you're more energized, where you can think more. And like science has tried to boil this down as to like, oh, maybe it's your sleep cycle. If you're a night owl, you get that way at night. And if you are a early bird, you get that way in the morning. And so like there are some systems out there, science is trying to like help people understand their solar cycle as to like when is the best time of the day to do things. But like it's important to actually utilize that tool in this time bending tool belt, because I know that if I'm working at my peak time, which for me is usually between like 10 in the morning and 3 p.m. If I'm working from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., I'm going to get twice as much work done in half as much time. That's time bending. That's time bending. I can work a 5-hour workday and get as much done as somebody working 8 or 10 hours, as long as I'm working when my particular biochemistry is working most efficiently. So women also have this complicating factor of menstruating, meaning our cycles are a month long as well as a day long. So we have day long cycles and we have month long cycles. And so there are times of the month where you're going to have a ton more energy. You're actually going to have access to more of your creativity. You're going to have more access to your drive, your inner willpower to get things across the finish line. And then there are times of the month when you want to hibernate, and like you couldn't be creative if you were paid to be creative. And that's a normal part of your energetic cycles too. So when we talk about the tool belt of time bending, we'd be remiss if we didn't honor the individualized energetic cycles of people, because it's not one size fits all. Everyone is going to have the ability, but when they're going to be most apt to get more done in less time is going to be different based on the body's chemistry.
And a lot of times that takes measuring your own cycles and then looking back, right? And so for me, it wasn't until I started tracking my cycle that I was like, oh, that's why I often feel like two different people. And even for men, you mentioned like the masculine solar cycle, it's 24 hours a day, but like I'm in North Carolina and we have 4 seasons, right? And so the solar cycle in the winter is much shorter. There's a lot less daylight than there is in the summertime, where we have an immense amount of daylight. So even in the solar cycle, it's not like for these 8 hours, then these 8 hours, then these 8 hours, then these 8 hours. Instead, it looks a lot more like sometimes it's for 6 hours and sometimes it's for 12 hours. We have to honor all these different cycles, the seasonal cycles, your own cycles. And the only way you can do that really is by tracking in some way, shape, or form your own cycles. And what will appear to you is, on these days I'm most productive, on these days I'm least productive. If you don't have a menstruation cycle, it might be for these hours I'm most productive and these hours I'm least productive. But then maybe in the winter it looks different for you than it did in the summertime, right? We all like go through seasonal depression and all that, right? Like there's just more energy for all of us in the summer than there is in the winter. So we want to take all these things into account. And if you're like, that sounds way too big, I promise you it's not. Sarah and I have done it. And that's why this container is going to be so very intimate, because we're going to have to support you through first finding your cycles and then second, honoring those cycles.
You just introduced them to like the next Russian doll up. So I'm going to actually go back to the next Russian doll down. So yeah, you're going to have periods of time throughout the day when you're going to be more focused and able to get more done. But then we have even hour time block cycles wherein some people can focus really well for an entire hour. And some people have a 5-minute attention span. And some of that is actually, I want to say fictitious, but it's not fictitious. It's that you have been falsely, it's like, I'm thinking like fake
Programmed.
food, but yes. And this goes for every stage of the Russian doll journey here, because we have air conditioning, we have heat, we have electric lights. And so like we've programmed our bodies to have more like stasis throughout the entire year than our ancestors did before. But when it comes to hourly cycles, where we see this being a programming that is harmful, is that we know that being able to do longer periods of deep and focused work enable us to get more important work done over time. And we have a focus issue in our society right now. And that is because we have been falsely reprogrammed to not have a very long attention span. So something else that we very much work on is taking back your focus. A lot of the focus that you've lost has been intentionally hijacked from you. And that's not to say that like we all don't have a max naturally of like how long we can pay attention to something. But whatever it is that you have currently, it is not your max. I can guarantee you that, unless you are very good about not participating in modern day society or scroll culture of any way, shape, or form. And so we've actually got a little 30-day refocus, a royal refocus challenge going on the Crowns and Chaos Substack. If anyone's interested, we're day 2 today, where over the next 30 days, we're just implementing tiny little actions that will help you reclaim a little bit of that focus. But we're hoping to not only be able to help you get more out of your day by spending more time doing good work within your daily cycles, but also bolstering your ability to focus for longer than 10, 15, 20 minutes, which Cal Newport calls this deep work. And I think it is important work, but that is also part of time bending, is taking back your focus and your attention from all of the different bodies around you that are trying to hijack it from you.
It's probably worth adding an asterisk here that I will be highly involved in this container. And so it will get very metaphysical. We will be working on an energetic level. We will be working with the subconscious and the archetypes within you, your different aspects of self, how you relate to yourself, how you relate to your body, your subconscious. We will be doing the deep work.
And the program will be richer for it. Another tool in the time bending tool belt is probably the only tool that time management really kind of works with. And so I'll just throw it out there, but that is the process of like systemization. If you ever have heard, and I've said it, so you've probably heard it, that within your zone of genius, when you operate more fully from your zone of genius, which we definitely want you to do, because that is where you have the greatest capacity to bend time, because it is not only what you love doing, it's also what you're really good at. And so the more that you can spend time in that space, the better for everybody, because that's your genius. It's your gift to the world. It's really what you've literally spent your whole life honing this craft of being you. There's this process of getting there that we call like automate, eliminate, and delegate. So if it's outside of your zone of genius, we encourage you to automate, delegate, or eliminate. And that's like the only tool in time management that time bending also kind of has a little bit of an overlap with. Maybe there's another, but that's the one that stands out that you've probably heard before. And we utilize that process of like systemization in order to create efficiencies in anything that has to stay on your plate, but doesn't necessarily need your creative genius. Like we want you to be creating in the world and giving more, not just like executing the things that have always, it's a thing that needs to be done. There will always be those things that has to be done. But anytime you're doing something that can be automated or systematized to be more efficient, and in an inefficient way, you're stealing from yourself creative time and capacity. And so another tool in this tool belt is taking a look at what are the things you absolutely have to do and that you do all the time, and where can we implement better efficiencies, automations, systems to help facilitate that process. Look, I never want to go back to a world without a washing machine, period, right? Like we love technology. We love the fact that the ability for us to automate has allowed us more creative capacity. That's how we grow. That's how we evolve as humans and as society. We definitely want that for people, with the understanding that we can't get rid of everything. We can't all just be here in like meditative, creative space all the time. You do actually have to execute things, but if it's boring work, if it's habitual, like we want to minimize that as much as possible. The next tool in the time bending tool belt is what I'm calling synergy. And this is the definition of synergy. And this is just like an ad hoc, like I looked it up once when I was like 14 years old, and this is what I took away with it. It's like basically when systems are better together than they are apart. And so they complement each other, and that is the process of synergy. Now, sometimes this looks like hiring somebody outside of yourself. Like I mentioned earlier, like I'm better at websites than somebody else that might be listening. And so like, if I was to do the website, I would save that person a ton of time because I have the ability to do that in a lot less time. So it might take them a week to get it up. It might take me 3 days to get it up. Now they've saved 4 days. That's time bending, folks, right? When you and I are trying to work on a project together, if I do something and I pass it off to you, and then you pass it back to me, it takes a little bit more time than if we spent literally just 45 minutes together. We're like, whew, that was it. But that was so fast. Like that's synergy, right? Because you have a genius, I have a genius, and we're working in synergy together. So working with other people that complement your zone of genius, or outsourcing is a word I don't really love, but like tapping into other people's genius, whether it's through coaching or mentoring or educating, you reach out to an expert in the field. You don't have to go and get a 6-year degree in medicine. All you got to do is call the doctor, right? Like that's time bending. That's synergy, right?
Yeah, you and I have a great synergy. I bring all the energetic metaphysical stuff, and like you're pretty good at that. But people tend to listen to me when I say it. It comes from the depths of me. It's what I've spent all my life honing. And then like when I talk business, I'm pretty good at that, but people don't hear it because I didn't spend my whole life honing that. When you speak up on business, you're the authority. And so together we create a holistic ecosystem for the people that we support because they get both really rich and in-depth business support as well as really rich and in-depth metaphysical, subconscious, energetic support.
2 more tools in this toolkit. As of right now, we could probably create more. Maybe we collapse a couple because a couple of them have a little bit of overlap. For example, the next one that we were talking about, deep work, the other tool that really speaks more profoundly, I think, to this is this concept of flow state. Now, studies have shown that when people spend time in their flow state, that their happiness increases. And by the way, when you're in the flow state, time ceases to exist. Talk about time bending. There is no more powerful or potent tool for time bending, or at least when we're talking about the perception of time, than the flow state. But science has also told us that humans experience fewer and shorter periods of flow state in current times because we are constantly interrupted. We have emails dinging, we have phones buzzing, we have pop-ups on our computer, we have all the things. And not least of which is that more and more people work from home now, and we've got kids and dogs and mail people and right? This is also another reason why studies have shown open office concepts reduce productivity, because people struggle to get into a flow state when they're in a big old room with 40 other people. So flow states are called flow states because you get into a space where your conscious and your subconscious are firing together. So you are getting so much more work done because your conscious brain is tapping into the subconscious creative flow. And before you know it, 3 hours have gone by. And it didn't feel like 3 hours, but because you were in this mental state with access to both your logic brain and your creative brain, you were able to get way more done in way less time. And you were also able to create something of way higher quality than you would have if you were just like using the hammer of time management. Got to get this done right now, right? So a flow state, no interruptions, potentially even some music that helps your brain waves kind of get in sync. That's honestly one of my favorite, and it might be even one of the best metrics for how well you're doing in time bending is how easily you can get yourself into the flow state and how frequently you get into flow state.
Hemispheric synchronization, you would want to look up hemisync for your binaural beats or whatever music you're going to be listening to, and you want to have both earbuds in so that the waves that are being produced are basically flossing both sides of the brain. The other thing I would add is slowing down to speed up, which is somewhat like the flow state, especially like if you feel rushed in your body. The medicine for that, and I kind of touched on it earlier, is to slow way down. And that might sound counterintuitive, like, Dawn, I only have 5 minutes to get there. I'm already late. Why would I slow down? And it's because when you speed up, you're operating in the survival state and you're creating more obstacles, right? So we want you to slow way down, and that can also put you into the flow state. Meditation is a great way to do this. We now have, obviously, technology that can help us achieve this.
There's a Zen saying that says you should sit in meditation for 20 minutes a day. Unless you're too busy, then you should sit for an hour. And this is that same thing. It's basically saying that if you can slow way down all of that mental chatter, it's the noise. When you slow way down, meditate on the busiest of days, you're going to come out of it with a clarity and understanding of what needs to be done. There's going to be less rush and less noise in your atmosphere. And it's not going to feel, I mean, again, perception of time. It's not going to feel like my whole day was just rocked because I didn't have clarity. I was constantly, pulling, I was trying to use the hammer, right?
You're going to have precision. If you're somebody who feels scatterbrained, right, that's because you're in this heightened state all the time. And so when you slow way down, you get that clarity, but then you have precision in your action. And actually, when we look at things like Kundalini or divine feminine practice, what we see is a level of grace that they have. And you can see this in people, the way they move through their day, the way they move in conversations, how intimate they're willing to be in their conversation, how present they are. All of those things can be attributed to the clarity and precision they receive from just slowing down. You also experience life. What? You experience life? Can you believe? What life? Where?
Dawn, I'm too busy to experience life. When I've accomplished my to-do list, then I will experience life.
From 6 feet under.
Okay, I have one more tool, and it is potentially very massive, so I don't necessarily want to go super deep in this. We do have another podcast on the Crowns and Chaos podcast where we talk about this concept of sacrifice. But the other piece about time bending is this practice of value-based commitments and boundaries to uphold those. And the reason this is a tool, and potentially one of the first tools that you want to reach for in a tool belt regarding time bending, is that we society-wide, I think, have very murky identification with our own value sets. And as a result, we hold other people's values to be true. And we will then defend them. And then it clutters up our house with a bunch of knickknacks that actually don't mean anything to us, but we're constantly having to dust and organize and you do all the things with, right? Sometimes this is literal. Sometimes I'm talking about literal. Like if you have a whole bunch of stuff in your house and you're not intimately connected with it, but like so-and-so gave it to you for your birthday, so you feel like you have to have it out there, but you actually kind of hate it. And now you're just having to actually like move it every time you move and dust it when you clean. Like that's time. You could be doing literally anything of more value. And so becoming really clear on what your value sets are enable you to decide what you're making sacrifices for. And again, we talk about this in this other podcast, but anytime you do anything, including washing your dishes, you're sacrificing the option of doing everything and all things. So if you're going to like a bunch of things that you're like, I don't really like these people, but I'm afraid what they're going to say. I don't want to go to my cousin Susie's birthday party because I don't really like those people, but I'm afraid what they're going to say. Or I spend an extra hour getting ready to go to the grocery store because I'm afraid someone might see me and what they're going to say or think of me. Then you are sacrificing your own internal desires and drives and passions and mission for what other people think is important, it's a total time suck. It's a total time suck. And imagine how much farther you would get and how much faster you would get there if you were just laser focused on the things you value and the mission and purpose that you hope to achieve in life, and sacrificing everything else. It's a little bit of violent alchemy there, but sacrificing everything else in the name of what you hold sacred.
And at some level, you're sacrificing integrity, which is the base of everything. You're sacrificing your own foundation. People get upset with me all the time because they give me things that I give away or I throw them away. And they're like, hey, do you still have that thing? And I'm like, no, I don't fucking have that thing. And then they're, oh, well, that meant a lot to me. Well, you shouldn't have given it to me because it didn't mean a lot to me and I gave it away. And that's because if it's clutter, if it's junk, I see that it's a waste of time and I'm willing to sacrifice anything to remain in integrity. And so if you hand me something that you really valued, you should have just kept it, because if I don't value it to the same degree, I'm going to sacrifice it. And I would expect you to do the same. I'm not a big, I like to gift give for people who I really care about, but I don't gift give with attachments. You know, if you don't like this in a year and it's gone, I'm not going to be like, a part of my soul has been taken with that Highland cow stool that I bought for you last year for your birthday, Sarah, which you still have. But if you didn't have it, if Evie spilled a Coke on it, you know what I mean? Like, I would be fine. And that's because I don't allow things like that to take up mental chatter. I have way cooler shit to focus on, like alchemy and psychology and the subconscious, you know?
I would not be fine if she spilled anything on that cow, because I hold that sacred. Marie Kondo wrote a book about the life-changing magic of tidying up. And as a part of this book, she asked people to hold something and determine, like, does this bring me joy? Right. And I think a lot of people were like, the fuck she mean by that? Like, I'm holding a spatula. I have 3 spatulas. Which one of these spatulas makes me more joyful? I don't know. Right. So I think like a lot of people got stuck there, but like, that's what we're talking about here, is that like, pick your favorite spatula. And what color do you like? Which one do you like? The way that it bends a little bit more? Do you like the way that this one flips pancakes, right? Like, just pick your favorite spatula and get rid of the others without attachment. Like, yes, your grandmother gave you this one, and this one came from your wedding shower 14 years ago. If it's not the one you reach for every time, get rid of it, because now you're having to wash it, you're having to organize it, you're having to move it around every time you're looking for your favorite spatula. All of those things are time-sucking experiences, and you can just be done with them.
This includes people and their business. Stay about my business, okay? Like, when you're always in other people's business, social media was an example you used on the last Crowns and Chaos podcast. People who are just constantly sucking your energy dry. If you're constantly worried about what your son is doing or about what your grandma did or what your best friend is, then like, you're placing your energy. You can read the book Becoming Supernatural by Joe Dispenza, and he talks about your little Taurus field, and that all these things, everything you do in a day, from like deciding what you're going to wear to what you're going to eat, to taking the phone call from your mom, to even just thinking, how's my best friend Susie doing? All of those things are you placing your energy in things outside of you. Now, that to some degree is relevant. We are communal beings. We want to have connections with people and to some degree with things. A lot of it is just stealing energy from you. I always use the example that you have like a mason jar of energy every morning, and every thought, every emotion, every decision that you make in a day depletes the jar. And so whenever you get to the end of the day and you're like, I really needed to do this for my business, we could have skipped the call with the bestie who's just telling you the same bullshit about her relationship that she told you last week. You know, like, what is sucking your energy? Because you can't time bend if you're not conscious of every single thing that you're giving your time and energy away to.
My daughter wants to be a fashion designer. She's 8, but she loves fashion. Fashion means nothing to me. And when I think of fashion, I'm like, Steve Jobs had it fucking nailed. Same turtleneck, same jeans. That was his idea of fashion, right? And so he was able to utilize all this other time and energy to do what was for him his mission in the world. I would never tell my daughter, who wants to be a fashion designer, that one turtleneck and jeans is the way to go, because her passion, her mission looks very different, right? So it's another example of the fact that there's no one schematic for time bending. The thing that decides your schematic as to what and how to use the tools within the toolbox of time bending is literally pumping the center of your chest right now. It's the center of your torus field, right? It's the thing that helps you navigate like GPS through the world of what calls you to draw closer and what really invites you to step back. When we look out in society and say, society says I have to be this way, society says I have to dress this way, society says I have to act this way, society says I have to be this way, then you're stepping outside of the ability to time bend. And so if you're ready to step back in your own torus field and start bending time so that you can lead the freest, most fulfilling life that you could envision, then this program is 100% for you. And life is going to look a lot different on the other side.
Absolutely. Another awesome episode of both Mobile Bev Pros and Crowns and Chaos. Sarah, thanks so much for having me on, and we will talk to you guys on the next one.
And that wraps up today's episode. I hope it was valuable. I would love to hear from you what you thought. You can drop me a line at hello@mobilebevpros.com or find me on Instagram at mobilebevpros. If you're looking for more valuable mobile bar related content, we have a website full of it. You can find us at www.mobilebevpros.com. And I'd love to see you in our Facebook community, also by the name of, you guessed it, Mobile Bev Pros. Thank you for joining me today, and until next time, cheers.